Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar Performance Measures and Health Index of ITS Assets. My name is Kevin Vita, and I'll be helping with facilitating today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Traffic Management Center Pooled Fund Study and Federal Highway Administration, and hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, also known as NOCO. As a quick reminder, if you don't know already, at NOCO we offer a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. On the top right side of your screen, you can see a box called Useful Links. You can browse through those links for TSMO resources and news. Previous webinar recordings and case studies can be accessed from there. Now, I'll cover a few logistics for today's webinar. We're recording this webinar, and the recording, along with the presentation slides, will be available through the on-demand learning section of the NOCO website. All the attendees' phones are on listen-only mode by default, but we'd like you to stay engaged by using the question and discussion pod for comments and questions. We have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions, we encourage all of you to enter them in the questions pod as they come to your mind at any time. The questions will be read out loud one at a time by the moderator, and our presenters will answer each question. So that's all I have, and with that, I'll hand it over to our moderator, John Obenberger, to start us off.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the work and willingness to partner by NOCO, National Operations Center of Excellence, for hosting today's webinar. We appreciate the partnership and help in allowing us to share this information with everybody. The webinar today, we're covering a project that the TMC Pooled Fund Study and Federal Highways sponsored. Title of the project was Performance Measures and Health Index of ITS Assets. The purpose of today's webinar, sorry, advance the slides. Purpose of today's webinar is to look at successful practices and pull out lessons learned from agencies around the country on their experiences with using asset management practices to their ITS devices and systems that they may have in place. We hope at the end of today's webinar, you'll be able to identify some of the goals that other agencies have used in their asset management planning activities, possible state or local performance measures that different agencies have used to assess the current conditions of their different assets. And also what were some of the data sources that were used to assess the condition of the different assets. And then we hope you're also able to look at possible activities that may support an overall asset management effort within the TSMO program for your ITS assets. So sort of our outcomes that we've identified for today's webinar. The series of presentations that we'll cover today are listed on the slide. And with that, I will introduce the first speaker, Mr. Rod Schilling from the Nevada Department of Transportation. Rod was the champion for this project from the TMC Pooled Fund Study and was involved in the project from the development of its scope of work all the way through acceptance of the final product and this webinar. So with that, Rod, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the project.
Hi, everybody, and thanks very much, John, for that, and Kevin as well for partnering with this presentation today. Like I said, performance measures and health index of the ITS systems and assets was a fairly new concept, and this here provided that tool for us to kind of, reach out and then develop this project. So I really appreciate the efforts, from the TMC Pooled Fund Study and so forth, and guiding this final report. So here's the final report right there, FHWA HOP 20-025. And we can find that study here through the TMC Full Fund Studies link right there. Some of the things and why we do these, need to apply for the asset management. Like I was saying, it's a new concept, with the ITS devices and the TMCs. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we had some type of asset management practices to help all of the other agencies to develop these, to be able to monitor and assess and report on all of the conditions on the specific assets. Specifically, not just, what the manufacturers recommend, but be able to have a little bit more specific metrics associated with those and be able to integrate the condition of those assets into your planning efforts for any of the future TMC's investments. Incorporate the condition of those assets into your day-to-day TMC management and your operations as you move forward with that. Be able to improve and allocate some of your resources needed for those routine maintenances, repairs, or replacements to be able to improve on your operational readiness and everything associated with your devices and your TMCs. We wanted to be able to explore and initiate some of these activities, the resources, and the methods to establish, conduct, and sustain a viable asset management program and activity. In addition, with the TMC Full Fund Study project, with this performance measures and health index of our ITS assets, we looked at some synthesis of some current practices using the asset management practices for ITS assets in the TMCs. We're going to look at, how we provide some of those examples of how those asset management practices can improve the management, your maintenance, and the reliability of those ITS assets and their devices for those TMCs. How we're going to explore, to integrate all of this within your conditions into the artisanal plans, and how we can integrate that, also with your TAMP. It was very important, especially for us here at the Nevada Department of Transportation, to recognize that because it is a new concept. Your pavements and bridges are very well integrated and so forth, but we want to kind of look at how we can do that with your ITS assets as well. And then also look at, the other agencies and some of the regional plans and capture some of the results of this, put that into the final report and make it available, for everybody on the TMC webpage. And then now, of course, is to conduct this webinar and to share that information. So with that, we'd like to take it to the next step, and I think I want to introduce Mr. Dan Lukasik. Let me see. And I'll do a little bit of an introduction. Mr. Lukasik is he's the Vice President and Intelligent Transportation Systems Sector Leader for Parsons. Dan has over 30 years of experience in the design and implementation of ITS systems used for the managing of freeways, your toll roads, arterial roadway networks, as well as the transit systems. He's considered an expert in the connected and autonomous vehicles, the advanced transportation management systems, active traffic management, and integrated corridor management. Dan is a member of the TRB Freeway Operations Committee and is a co-chair of the TRB Active Traffic Management Subcommittee. So with that, let's see, I think the next, obviously, there we go. All right, thank you very much. Whoops, I think the slides slid a little too far. Is that right? Or are we okay?
I think we're okay. Rod, this is Dan. Do you want me to just move the slides from here, or?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so I'm going to walk through the document that Rod talked about here. So again, the purpose and objectives of the research in the report was really to synthesize and identify best practices in ITS asset management. And again, talking about some objectives of the document, what ITS assets should be managed, what type of data analysis methods should be followed, and what conditions should be identified for those assets. We'll also hope to learn from what activities, resources, methods agencies have been using to do asset management for ITS devices. And then there's discussion in the report about how asset management initiatives can be integrated with TAMPs, TSMO plans, and other regional strategic plans. So here's the basic asset management definition, right, which I'm not going to read, but it really is about, the systematic process of trying to operate, maintain, improve in physical assets. So this is kind of the general definition of any type of asset management, and we're applying it specifically to ITS asset management. And it includes monitoring, operating, maintaining, improving, and as it relates to maintaining, that includes routine and emergency repairs, as well as system replacements. And then you see at the end there that this CFR is referenced, and that CFR really is about the requirement that all state DOTs prepare transportation asset management plans, and that requirement encourages that those transportation asset management plans include ITS. Not required, but it's encouraged. So we did a literature search. We reached out and received information from 24 state DOTs as well as other agencies. It included, TMC, Pool Fund Study, member states, other DOTs, some other agencies as well provided input. In certain cases, we conducted phone interviews with selected agencies to discuss what they're doing as it relates to ITS asset management, performance measurement. We identified 44 documents and resources, which is listed in the document appendix. Appendix B specifically is where those documents are. I actually think there's a few more now, like 48 documents I think are in that appendix. So a little discussion on the components of ITS asset management plans. So we're going to discuss the goals for asset management initiatives and actions. We'll discuss specifics, performance measures that should be looked at, and we'll identify the assets and some suggestions on what should be tracked and monitored, what should the attributes be, and what the data collection frequency should be. So that's all contained in the report, and I have some examples of this information in the upcoming slides. This is really telling us a little summary of what we found in the transportation asset management plans. So we found a number of TAMPs that were submitted, and many of them did mention ITS assets to some degree, whether it was field assets, field devices, communications, ITS assets, maybe other hardware components. And then there was mention of what the condition of the asset was, if there were performance targets for those ITS assets. There was discussion on potential life cycle costs, risk analysis, and even funding. And the table really shows, based on the TAMPs, what information was included. So, we were encouraged to see how many TAMPs did discuss ITS assets, and many of them discussed all of these specific attributes as part of the discussion. But you can see a summary of all of them. This is only a partial table. The full table is contained in the actual final report. Little discussion on asset management goals and objectives, and in the report there's summary of the specific goals and objectives that some agencies actually noted as it related to ITS asset management, and then there were some suggestions on what some good goals and objectives would be. So here's a good example of one. So the high-level goal here is to maximize the reliability, efficiency, and lifecycle costs of ITS, and ensure the effective operation of transportation management systems. And then the supporting objectives would be maintain a greater than 90% uptime for all critical Tier 1 assets. And we'll discuss these tier of assets in a few slides. But those assets that we really need at a high reliability level, those are your Tier 1 assets, and we would want them to be operating 90% of the time or higher. Another goal might be to maintain a greater than 70% uptime for, say, Tier 2 assets, non-critical ITS assets. 90% of the ITS assets will operate within 90% of their life expectancy. All of these are actually real objectives that we found from agencies. So these are real numbers that we saw in the reports that we reviewed. But 90% of assets operating within 90% of their life expectancy, that would be, let's say, a device, a CCTV camera was rated to operate for 100,000 hours, or its lifespan was considered to be 10 years. Then we would want that device to make it to the 9-year mark or make it to 90,000 hours if that's what it was rated to be. So that would mean that the asset maintenance and operation plan would be put in place to make sure it got there. So are you doing the routine maintenance? Are you doing quality checks? Are the devices being monitored in a level to ensure that it would make it to 90% of their life expectancy? So that metric would be that a device is only lasting to 50% of its life expectancy because no routine maintenance is done to keep that device operable. Another objective then, implement a solution to measure ITS asset performance. And some agencies really don't have something that measures it on a regular basis. Develop an ITS asset performance measurement data analytics platform. In the report, you're going to see some nice example dashboards and reports that many agencies have. You're going to see some presentations later from agencies that have really good data analytics for this. And then lastly, establish an ITS maintenance program with service level agreements. And that could be, having a contract that states that a device is repaired within X number of hours of when a failure occurs. Another key discussion point was assigning asset management roles and permissions to staff. So we identified specific roles or example roles, including data entry personnel, operators, field maintenance personnel, field inspectors, contractors, even TMC software and system integrator contractors, and what their role would be in the asset management process. So a data entry operator would be someone, as an example, that would enter the ITS asset information into the database. We have a new detector, we have a new camera, we have another new device. We've entered that data in the database to make sure it's available, and we update it. That an operator may create maintenance tickets. So we've detected that a device has failed, and we will create a maintenance ticket so that's now in our formal maintenance online management system to go ahead and repair that device. And we put in as much information as necessary so that the repair could occur. And then it goes all the way down into the people that actually do the maintenance, the people that inspect the maintenance, IT administrators, TMC operators. So this is really just some examples of what we saw as very typical roles for the asset management. This is a nice example table that came from New York State DOT. Apologize, I know it's a little small, but it actually goes in there and identifies the activity that might be needed in the asset management lifecycle, from entering the information in the database initially to creating a trouble ticket when something is broken, to fixing the issue, to then inspecting the issue. And you can see the roles of the different people identified. So as an example, if we want to edit asset information in the database, that role is assigned to the data entry operator or the data entry manager. If we want to issue tickets, that's assigned to a different role. So this is just an example. So it's a nice table, and it might be something that agencies should look to adopt as a model for doing complete end-to-end asset management. Another thing to look at is really what are the performance measurement examples, and these are some typical performance measures that should be considered. One is just asset condition, which can be described as good, medium, or poor. and that can be calculated by comparing, you say, the age of the device against its service life. Is it a device that's 80% into its service life, and is it a device that's showing a lot of failures? That might fall into that poor condition, as an example. Asset health time, uptime, reliability. So this is amount of time that the equipment was up or not operational. So this is a very typical measure that we would see in a dashboard or a report for ITS assets, that 95% of the vehicle detectors are operable in a given month, in a given year. Mean time between failure is the predicted or measured elapsed time between a failure. So if we have a specific device and it fails every 2 years on average, then its mean time between failure would be 2 years. And often vehicle or equipment manufacturers give you their estimated mean time between failure, and then you can measure that against what the actual is. Mean time to repair is an important measure for estimating costs and understanding the impact. You know, some equipment can be repaired in just a few hours from when it malfunctioned, depending on the type of failure, and others may take a long time to repair, especially if the repair is maybe something in the field and lane closures need to be arranged and things like that. But this helps us assess impact and costs. It's very good to also measure malfunction type. Is it a fan failure? Is it a temperature failure? Is a certain card or component frequently failed? That would help us maybe even replenish spare parts. If we know a certain component fails frequently, we can start to buy those spare components at a greater level, and it would help keep our uptime better to have that. And then lastly, another good is life cycle costing and whole life costing. And some of the agencies that we found definitely did that in a good level to help them understand what it's really costing them to keep things in good repair. This is just an example dashboard that came from New Jersey DOT, and it really shows each device type, and it gives you a percentage of uptime for that device. So this one's divided by the device type: CCTV camera, dynamic message sign, portable variable message sign, communications, Bluetooth sensors. But this is just a nice example. We saw many similar examples from other agencies as well. So kind of key questions for developing an asset management plan: which assets are the most important? What asset management activities should be considered for those assets, including inventorying? What are the key items to consider when assessing ITS asset performance and placing them into these tiers that I mentioned earlier? And the devices that are assigned to the tier, it can change based on agency needs, agency priorities. Key asset management activities. This is the list of those activities that we saw as best practices, including having a centralized ITS asset information system, creating device tiers and prioritizing devices by tiers, establishing ITS asset management contracts to keep those devices and systems in good repair, developing data management plans, developing asset management plans, performing life cycle planning, installing asset management tools to measure and track fixing of asset management issues, and developing obsolescence plans. And you could clearly tell that the agencies that are doing a great job with asset management uptime, they really are doing most of these things or many of these things in our experience. So we talked about this framework of ITS asset tiers. We suggested in the report 3 tiers, where tier 1 would be any asset that's critical to operations and should not be allowed to have anything more than a very minimal downtime. We talked about tier 2, which would be the second tier of assets that, we need those systems to be operational. They're highly beneficial to operations. They cannot tolerate a little less uptime or a little more downtime. And then lastly, tier 3 is an asset that's not critical to operations, but is helpful to operations. This is an example of an asset tier. So tier 1, again, let's say we had transportation management system servers or database servers or comm servers or our physical communication media or critical ITS field devices like dynamic message signs. We might determine that all of those things are in this high-level tier, that if any one of those systems went down for any extended period, it would greatly impact an agency's ability to operate. Tier 2 would be, here's some examples: road weather information, CCTV cameras, backup communications, video wall systems. So, for example, we all know that most systems that we see today have cameras, CCTV cameras. It's not critical that they're there all the time, operational, so we can tolerate a little less downtime. And then tier 3 is other devices like highway advisory radio or way in motion, call boxes, portable devices, portable signs. I should note that, some agencies, and an example might be there are some agencies that are much more impacted by, say, weather conditions. They operate their systems based on when weather occurs, and they have operational practices and strategies that change drastically when there is bad weather. In that case, maybe the road weather information systems would move to tier 1, and other agencies it's not as impactful. So it really should be assessed agency by agency on what should be in what tier. Talked about the need to develop a data management plan as part of a best practice. How are we collecting data? How are we archiving data? How are we ensuring data accuracy and completeness? What type of reporting is available inside the data management systems? How is that information disseminated? So these are all things that should be in that data management plan. Decisions probably on how frequently data is collected, how is it stored, is it aggregated, is it just stored in its raw format? Those are all types of decisions that would probably be made as part of a data management plan. These are some examples of discussing asset type, the type of information that you might look to collect, and then examples of how frequently you could collect it. So the document actually has a lengthy table that discusses all different types of assets and attributes. So here's an example of, say, an asset like a database server or a comm system or a comm server. So you might want to collect information on that device make and model, its uptime, its processor speed, its temperature, its fan speed, its power supply health, all these types of things. And then how frequently would I want to collect that information and have it in the database? Some things are maybe just once a year, like the device make and model. Some things maybe you collect that piece of information once a day, once an hour, once every 15 minutes. So there's some suggested data points in the report about the type of data you should look at and how frequently you should potentially collect it. Here's an example of kind of asset management and operations, and we got some screens from Caltrans for their operational system. And here's an example that they actually have inside their advanced transportation management system the number of continuous vehicle detectors that can be tolerated to be failed before they're unable to calculate an accurate travel time. So this particular agency, they have detectors every third to half mile. They use those detectors to estimate travel times and post those travel times on signs. But if, for example, 30% of the detectors were failed, they would probably say that's not enough for me to calculate an average time. So they built it into their application on how asset reliability and availability is used. Some other examples here as well is some other parameters, the number of consecutive periods a detector can be failed, the number of initial periods that a device can be failed, a threshold test. So again, examples of a real-time application where they've actually entered failure management parameters for ITS assets into their system, and they enter thresholds that can be adjusted by the operator to help them just better use that information and data in a live system. Here's an example that came from the San Diego Association of Governments, where for an integrated core management solution, where they assign asset availability so they can manually assign whether or not a traffic signal controller or a dynamic message sign is used as part of a response to an incident. So they can manually say, okay, make that device unavailable. An example here might be we're going to make all the traffic signals unavailable through a school zone for a dynamic changing of traffic signal operations. So we're going to set the time period for when school is in session, and we're going to prevent the use and adjustment of those assets as part of that asset management plan. So another example of how asset management is used in operations in live systems. Some other things that are talked about in the document in terms of process and strategies is, again, assessing goals for ITS estimate and plans, establishing performance measures and targets, inventorying all ITS assets, assessing the condition of those assets continually, establishing the ITS asset management contracts, and then installing the asset management tool. I talked a little bit about those earlier, but these are all best practices that we observed were being done in the industry. Some of the other ones as well, performing life cycle cost analysis, integrating it into multi-year or strategic plans, developing obsolescence plans. What happens when devices are considered obsolete? Are we doing wholesale replacements? Are we doing upgrades? Do we have contracts in place to do automatic obsolescence upgrades? And then incorporate ITS asset management into TMS plans, TSMO plans, and in transportation asset management plans. The recommendation would be to probably incorporate it in all three of those activities or documents. And these are the locations. I think some of them were shown by Rod earlier on where you can find some of the key documents. I don't know, Rod, will we take a question now, or is that coming at the end?
I'm sorry. Yeah, that'll be coming at the end.
Okay.
If we could hold off, please, and then we'll go through those. And then if you could, any questions or whatever, you put in the discussion pod as well. Now, we're getting ready for Nevada Department of Transportation's presentation. We have two members on the team here, Mr. LaShawn Ford, who is our ITS project manager, and then Mr. Jim Whalen, who is our manager of the technology group. So this is our business plan with our ITS asset management. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. So this is LaShawn Ford. As you mentioned, I'm with the NDOT Traffic Operations Division. Today I'll be talking to you about our ITS Asset Management Business Plan. And then later on, we'll have a demo from my coworker, Jim Whalen, from our Traffic Operations Technology section. They'll be demonstrating our asset management program that we're currently working on developing. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. A little bit of background information. Over the last couple of years, NDOT, we've been working on implementing TSMO within our agency, and that's because we really recognize the importance of using data to drive business decisions. And with that, you need to, if you're going to use data to drive your decisions, you really need to make sure that the data you're receiving is accurate. And for us, that means making sure our ITS devices are functioning properly. So we started to look at our ITS asset management processes and seeing how we were performing those on a statewide level. And we started to see that ITS maintenance is kind of performed in an ad hoc basis. There's not a lot of consistency between our 3 NDOT districts. So this makes it kind of difficult for us to analyze the data we're receiving and make better decisions. So we decided as part of our NDOT TISMO implementation plan to create an ITS asset management business plan. And the basis of this was to expand upon what we had developed as part of our certified TAMP, which I'll talk about in a second. So within our asset management business plan, we have a few items, overview of existing future ITS asset management practices, federal reporting requirements. We did a data overlap and gaps analysis. And finally, we have a 3-year implementation plan. This implementation plan is going to be the focus of my presentation today. So a little bit about what we developed as part of our TAMP. So, you know, the TAMP traditionally has been really good for pavements and bridges, but as we mentioned in the previous presentation as well, it's really good to start looking at ITS devices and how we can better maintain those, since, you know, it's much different than traditional transportation assets. So we started off looking at the manufacturer's recommended life cycle for life cycle planning for ITS devices. As you can see, we have different maintenance activities that are recommended based on the service life of an ITS device. And when those maintenance activities occur based on our matrix, we have a resulting outcome of what can happen with those devices. So for example, if a device is below 80% of the manufacturer's recommended service life, we're recommending to continue good condition, which is the goal for all our devices. An inspection is needed, so that might entail going out, checking connections, making sure the device is calibrated correctly, checking the site for debris, things like that. And if you continue to do those inspections in the recommended time frames within our TAMP, you know, you have good asset condition. But as you can see, as a device ages, you start to get diminishing returns on what your maintenance can do for that device. So as you can see, for a high-risk device, which is 125% of manufacturer's service life, even if you do a major repair, the highest you can get is a medium risk. So at that time, it would be recommended to replace that device based on our activity matrix. So once we implemented this, we compared that to what we were doing before, which is a worst first strategy. Basically, as a device fails or something needs to be repaired, we would do the maintenance at that time. When we implemented this, we saw that there was a significant decrease in maintenance costs. So this is a good starting point for our asset management plan, but obviously much more information would be needed. So jumping into our implementation plan, we have a 3-year implementation plan with 4 phases, with phase 4 kind of an ongoing phase that will continue, and you'll see why in a second. So we'll go ahead and start with what we have for phase 1. So phase 1, in phase 1, we're basically formalizing our asset management process. So we're creating those goals, objectives, processes, and procedures, and getting them written down and documented. This step will require engaging our stakeholders and our maintenance personnel to make sure their problems and needs are addressed in our plan. Another really important part of this first phase is creating a formalized data language. As I mentioned, the 3 districts we don't have that consistency yet within the state of Nevada, so making sure all of our cabinets and devices are named properly and properly inputted into our asset management program will make sure our inventory is easily searchable and data is easily accessible for our users. Also in phase one, we're going to do financial resource management, making sure we are reviewing our funding, creating a plan to make sure our asset management goals are supported, developing strategies for prioritizing our maintenance activities, and developing device-specific KPIs or key performance indicators. This is really important because as we mentioned in the TAM, we're looking at the manufacturer's recommended life cycle, but there's vast differences, as we all know, between ITS devices. So looking at the specific maintenance needs for each of those devices would be extremely important. Looks like we lost connection. Perfect. Lastly, for phase one, we'll develop a quality control plan. This is making sure we have a proper training plan in place for making sure everybody's on the same page regarding our asset management plan, creating a maintenance hierarchy as well. Moving on to phase two, development of required data collection plans and performance measures. So in this step, it's highly critical for us to review our data sources to ensure that the data they're reporting is accurate. And as I mentioned earlier, the more accurate we can ensure our data to be, the better we can support our TSMO goals within NDOT. So we'll be reviewing those data sources and reviewing our asset inventory for accuracy as well. So updating all of our existing assets to the new naming conventions that we create in phase one, making sure it's up to date with all of the existing assets that are in there already, and then making sure that for future deployments of ITS assets, we're inputting them into the program and properly naming them. We'll also create a storage and archiving plan for data and update performance goals, targets, and baselines. So, once we have accurate data coming through and we verified that, that's a good time to take a look at what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and develop these performance measures. And it's important to note some of these we're already working on implementing within our asset management program. And so that'll be a continual process throughout the life of implementing our asset management project. Phase three, so this is develop a geographical interactive map, GUI reporting, and data visualization plan. So as I mentioned already, NDOT's working on our asset management program already. So by phase three, what we really want is full adoption of the program within our agency. So we want our users to be using the program, and we want to have implemented all of the input we had received in that stakeholder outreach and make sure all the functionality that was requested for our asset management program is implemented. This way we ensure user adoption and we make sure we have the best user interface for the people that are actually going to be using the program. At this time, we can also develop corridor-specific maintenance plans for some of our high-risk corridors that require a little more attention. And something that's true to our hearts is creating the data visualization of health index of the asset. We feel that having some sort of dashboard that shows, how your devices are performing, what the health is of those, it really creates a source of accountability for us to continue to maintain those devices and do the best that we can to keep them functioning properly. We feel that also having a data visualization tool is a really good tool to be able to show like our front office and things like that if we do need additional staff to maintain these devices. Because if we're unable to meet our goals, maybe it's additional staff, maybe we need additional funding. So we're really excited to create this data visualization for the health. Then phase 4, this is the one that will kind of be ongoing, like I said. Phase 4, basically we want to provide training to existing staff, identify where additional staff or training is needed. So maybe certain personnel, maybe their position needs to adapt. They need very specific training to be able to assist with our asset management goals. So that will be identified in phase 4. And then we want to create a asset management working group and hold regularly scheduled meetings with maintenance staff to address all of their needs, challenges, and successes in the field. This will really allow our asset management process to grow and evolve over time and make sure these things are getting addressed. So with that, that's it from the implementation plan. So now we're going to switch to Jim Whalen, who's going to give you a sneak peek at our asset management program and what we've been working on to support this effort. Thanks.
Thank you, LaShawn. I'm going to share with you two applications that we use, and one is the what we call the NDOT AMP or Asset Management Program. This particular program helps us inventory and provide maintenance to our ITS assets. In my group, we manage the Nevada Shared Radio System, which provides public safety communications for first responders statewide, ITS systems, and we've just started adding our signal lighting and ITS group in here, and they're starting to bring along pedestals and I believe the luminaires in the future. This application, we've been developing this for several years, and we've broken this down to where we identify, usually you have a camera, a flow detector, an RWIS or something like that, and these can all be co-located, and the intelligence is located in a common cabinet. So we've decided to identify the ITS assets as the parent to those ITS assets is that cabinet or that ITS site. And then from those sites, you have the child devices such as the cameras, DMS, and what have you, flow detectors. So this is kind of how we've broken it down, and as far as what information is out there. We can go in and take a look at each site. We can go in and look at each device. We can see what service requests have been issued. These numbers represent 83 opened tickets currently, and there's been over 1,800 tickets in the past year. And then we have a work order system for our FMS system, which is kits, and then we're able to allow users to come on if we need to have contractors when we're implementing new systems come in and add new devices into AMP. We can do that. The map gives you an overview of where all of our devices are located at. The teardrops indicate work orders that are open, and the individual icons indicate where ITS devices are. You can zoom in, and as you zoom in, it also displays where our fiber optics is along each of the major roads, and the clutter does go away, and it defines CCTV cameras, DMS signs, and what have you as you go into certain areas. Another feature that we have is that we've started to work on is the dashboard. This is more to give us a look at what work orders have been issued, what has been closed. We can drill down. We can look at the daily statistics. We found that this has been useful, but we've stopped any development on this dashboard as of right now because we want to make sure that we can present this dashboard to the department, and we in the technology group, our network is totally separate from the NDOT or the state enterprise network. So we want to be able to share this information with the NDOT. So we're going to move this dashboard to another platform, another BI platform, which I'll show you here in a little bit. You can go back. You can, sorry. You could go in and you can, like I said, we can go into the sites. It lists every site that we have here. You can click here and do a search. If you, let's see here. If you you can just type in a few letters, all the letters, or what you need to search a site. This particular site is at US 395 in McCarran. It's the on-ramp there. There's 7 sites or 7 devices at that site. It lists all the devices, ramp meters. We name all of our devices to give us some sort of sense of where the device is. So US 395 McCarran, and then at the end of the name, we put in whether it's a switch or DMS or whatever it is. So that when the operators or technicians are looking at it, they know exactly what that device is. You can go in and into each device and look at the different type of information that we provide. Again, we're still editing this and getting that information in. You can go and take this particular device. If it has been added incorrectly, we can go and relink it to another site. And it's been a very flexible application for us to use. You can go in and also do searches by keyword for your sites, devices, work orders, what have you. And this gives you a list of different categories that you can search by. We do keep track of all of our servers, PCs, the software. We do have in our sites, we've listed our ROCs, our road operations centers, our TMCs in there. And they list all the equipment that are there, the servers, the video walls. And so it's getting there. It's taken us time to get there. And it's a work in progress. The next application I wanted to share with you for performance evaluation is what we call our index data visualization module. And the index stands for the Nevada Data Exchange. And this is built off of the Traffic Data Management, the Traffic Management Data Dictionary version 3.0. This database goes out and pulls our FMS system, and it pulls it every 5 minutes and collects all that data from the FMS system, all the devices that the FMS system is talking to, and all the information that the devices are providing. And this application, or the data visualization module, presents updated data every 24 hours. So this data here is not updated every 5 minutes. It's updated every 24 hours. But this view here gives you a look at all the devices that we have out there, and also events. You can click on any one of these here, and it takes you down. And it takes you down to the next level. And come on. There it goes. Okay. It's a huge database, so it does take a little bit of time. We started this in 2014, I believe, and we've kept all the data since then and added some fast data into it. So you can drill down, and you can events by centers such as District 2, District 1, District 3. You can look at the different types of events, and then if you wanted to, you can go drill down into the year and month. And if you want to see further details, you can go down and look at down here and get the details for each event. Same way that we went to events, you can do that for any other devices out there. One of the problems when you look at this here dashboard is we want to define what operational is. For instance, for a ramp meter, you would think that we would be at we would want all ramp meters to be operational, but in reality, we're looking at how many ramp meters are functioning at this particular time throughout the state. So while it is reporting what is working right now, it's not reporting that and saying that every ramp meter that we have is operational. The CCTV cameras are a different story. This should be reflecting every CCTV camera out here. So if we're saying we have 62% of 1,729, maybe we need to be doing a better job performing maintenance on those CCTV cameras and other devices that are out there. All of these devices you can drill down into by district, on these detectors you can drill down to one specific flow detector. It will give you the information as far as each lane occupancy and the speed for that lane, and you can go down and also look at the you can do it for since 2014 all the way up to present, or you can do it for a specific week. So, and you can export that information. One of the problems with this dashboard is it is on our ITS network, and not everybody has access to it. So the next step, what we want to do is we want to make this visualization available to everybody in NDOT. So we're moving this to a platform called Power BI, and this platform has the same functionality as our index DVM. We allow Power BI to come in to our network and grab this information, and everybody in NDOT has accessibility to this dashboard. And again, here you can drill down into all the different devices. So that's a quick glimpse of what we're doing here in Nevada. And if you have any questions, please post them.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emily Dwyer, and I'm an ITS supervisor at GDOT. And today I'm going to talk to you a bit about our ITS comprehensive maintenance contract and how we use that to measure performance and health of our ITS system. So to start with an overview of the contract, the main element of this contract is a pay-for-performance that does a daily price per device for all of our roughly 4,500 devices we have in our system. This covers most of our ATS equipment on the interstate, but there are a few exemptions. In those exemptions are things like sign structures, poles, and fiber, really the assets that are a bit too high risk for us to have gotten competitive bids on maintaining that at a daily rate. In addition to the pay-for-performance aspect of this contract, we also have the mechanism to do repairs on exempt assets or non-pay-for-performance assets through optional and emergency services. Optional services allows us to do planned repairs on devices such as this pole you can see that's been knocked down. It's where a device is a part of the system, we need to get it back up and operating, but maybe it's not the most critical that it needs to be completed immediately. On the other side, we have emergency services, which is actually incentivized and gets the contractor out there to make a repair as quickly as possible. And if they complete a repair within the first 6 hours from notification, they are awarded an extra $2,500 for getting that repair done on time. This comes in super handy for us with our reversible toll lanes here in Georgia. And, if there's a critical device that's hit or damaged in those toll lanes and we're unable to open the lanes back to traffic, that's lost revenue for the state. So that's incredibly important. Another thing that's really interesting about this contract, it was actually awarded Special Experimental Project number 14 by FHWA, which allows for innovative contracting. I'll refer to it later as Step 14. And this is essentially at the core of it is a best value construction contract. So instead of going the low bid route that we went in the past, we were able to actually do a best value, which came in handy when we were trying to get the requirements in place for our ITS asset management system that I'll touch on in a few minutes. So to give you an overview of the timeline and how we got from where we started really until where we are today, in 2010, we did the first iteration of this contract, and we didn't really have much to work off of at that time. So we started off with a contract performance baseline of 90%. We were coming from a system that had 50, maybe if we were really lucky, 60% of devices operational at any given time. So 90% felt like a pretty high bar at that time. We also set a maximum allowable repair time of 45 days. Again, we're coming from this place of devices were kind of getting repaired when someone could get around to it. And as many people know, staffing can be tough for the DOT. And so 45 days also looked like a pretty good time window compared to what we were used to. Well, quickly into the 2010 contract, we realized we could have set that bar higher. Our contractor was coming in typically at 98, 99% most days for operational devices. So when we rebid the contract for the second iteration in 2015, we said, okay, we're going to up the ante a little bit. We're going to set that baseline performance level to 95%. We're also going to dial back significantly and take that maximum allowable repair time to 28 days. But what we found, again, very quickly is they were beating that most of the time. They were staying at that 98, 99% level. And with a 28-day repair time, we also found for these simple repairs, the contractor would take 27 days to work on other projects and then do the repair for the device on that 28th day. So really, they didn't need that much time. So coming into late 2019, when we prepared the RFP for the third iteration of this contract, we said, okay, we've learned some lessons here. We kind of know what we're doing going into this. We took those lessons learned and applied them. So we set our lowest level, which is for our general devices, to 93% for that baseline performance. We kept that mid-level, or what we refer to as our essential devices, at 95, similar to the previous contract. But then for those most critical devices, what we refer to as our vital devices, we actually upped that to 97%. You know, these are the devices where we really can't afford to have much downtime, so we needed to make sure that that portion of the system was operating at peak efficiency. We also reduced the maximum allowable repair time to 14 days. And I just want to note, that's 14 days for those general devices. So for our vital devices, the allowable repair time is 2 days or 12 hours, depending on the category of the device. So it really means that we're able to keep the system working as well as possible. So here we're looking at the categorization of devices. Part of this contract, with it being a per day, per device payment, each device has a different bid price that it is paid by. So just to show quickly that breakdown, there's the class, which really just is the type, CCTV, message signs, hubs, different things. The classification, which I mentioned previously, general, essential, vital, that mostly pertains to how quickly the device has to be repaired. The asset status, operational, down, waiting, those operational and down I think are pretty straightforward. These other statuses you see, we're trying to accommodate that there are going to be things outside of the scope of this contract that are impacting the system. And so we needed to have a way to not necessarily penalize the contractor on this project, but also not necessarily pay them if the devices were not being maintained. So this allowed us to have a little bit of flex in the contract to say, okay, there's other things going on that we need to accommodate. And last is the area. So you can see here on the right, we broke the state into 4 different areas. And you can see each county, is broken down with the number of devices per county. And so what this allowed us to do was, in the bid, we allowed the contractors to bid a separate price per area. And so knowing that the density of our devices is in Area 1 in the Metro Atlanta area, we got a better bid price on those items than we did for someone that was going to have to potentially make a repair in Savannah or South Georgia, where mobilization costs were much higher. Now I'm going to dive into our ITS asset management system, what we're referring to as our IMS, which is really the backbone of how this contract works. So some of the requirements we had in place were that we needed to be able to monitor devices in real time. At any time, I need to be able to query the system and say how many devices are operational, how many are down. On a per device level, look and see what's working, what's not, to really understand the system and how it's operating. We also needed the ability to ticket devices. So with this system, we're able to go in there. For example, I drove by a DMS and saw that it was not, the brightness wasn't quite right. So when I got to where I was going, I pulled it up, put in a ticket, and immediately that starts going through the work order process where that device is getting repaired. It also allows our TMC operators to put in tickets as they're going through their day-to-day activities and they find devices that are not quite at 100%. Probably my favorite aspect of our IMS is the data analytics. So previously we had some data that we used in the previous contracts, but it really boiled down to lat long and device type. There wasn't a ton of information in there. So at the beginning of this contract, both our contractor and GDOT worked together on a really intense inventory, and we pulled together as much information as possible. So it's got that device type, lat and long, but it went a step further. We looked at install date, purchase date of the specific device that's out there, make and model, you know, all sorts of information that we could start to query, even down to the communication port that's being used on a specific device. So that allows us to start looking at things like mean time between failure by manufacturer. Here on the right, you can see just a screenshot I grabbed. This is the highest outage rate by manufacturer and model looking at our message signs. Well, you can quickly see that our lead stars seem to be not operating very well. It is far and away having the worst outage rate. But if I look at that a little more in depth, I can see that that looks to be a 66 millimeter pixel pitch. Well, that's likely the oldest devices that we have out there. I'm sorry, it looks like we've lost the presentation screen. Kevin or someone, can you get the presentation back up?
Yes, just 1 second. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can find it here.
All right, looks like we're back in business here. Sorry about that, everyone. So just to kind of pick up where we were, we've got that mean time between failure by manufacturer, which allows us to, instead of relying on anecdotal data to know what's working and what's not, we really have the information to back that up here. Another thing that's included in the system is warranty information. So now we can track much more carefully the warranties for devices and make sure that if a device is under warranty when it has a failure, that we can get that corrected by the manufacturer. Another one, as I kind of touched on before, device age. That is incredibly important for budgeting. It allows us to take a look at what devices are reaching, their expected end of life so that we can budget the funds, especially for a DMS or some of the larger, more expensive equipment, and know that we'll be able to do those replacements before that device reaches end of life. And last, this one probably looks kind of funny, data exports by corridor. This is one of those things that shouldn't seem that exciting, but for years we've been asked for this information. Hey, Emily, I need to know how many devices you have on I-20, what they are, where they are, all that sort of stuff. That's something we were having to pull manually in the past and put in a KMZ or something of that nature. So the ability to query our devices and look at them by corridor or different criteria is really helpful. And last, and certainly most importantly, is the way we track the payment for this contract. With 4,500 devices roughly and paying a daily price per device based on all those different categories, it gets complicated very quickly, and so we needed to make sure that we were confident in our method of payment. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into a few screenshots of how the system looks and kind of the information it offers us. So here we're looking at the current status of ITS devices. And what I've done is filter this down to look at the down devices across the state. So at the time I pulled this, we had 33 devices down. And you can see quickly, they're mostly clustered in the Atlanta area. That's really no surprise since that's where the density of our devices are. And at the bottom, you can see some great information to just get a quick understanding of what's going on. Which asset is it that's down? What type of failure? That's really helpful. We can see what's causing the failures in the field, the length of time that the device has been down. It's just a way to quickly understand how the system is operating. And here we can see just, we've come into the Metro Atlanta area, and this is really great for us. We hosted the Super Bowl in the last couple years, and so one of the things we were doing in the days leading up to that event was trying to make sure that our Metro Atlanta area devices were operating. And we were certainly prioritizing devices that were more visible over like a detection device that's going to be a little less visible. So what we can do here is you can see all your devices in the metro area that are down, and I could hover over each of these devices to see what type of device, what type of failure, so that we can prioritize our crews out there and say, hey guys, I know we've got a detector that's down. Let's step away from that and get this DMS fixed because that's more important for this event that's coming through town, so we can direct drivers. Here's another view. This is that ITS device view by route. So obviously you can go through and pull. You can look at a specific route of interest. Maybe we're doing work for our hurricane evacuation routes and we want to see what devices we have along those routes. You can also filter down to just our managed lanes to see the devices that are part of that managed lane operation. But my favorite piece of this actually is the manufacturer and model. So we have had issues in the past where a manufacturer came to us and said, hey, we are having a bad batch. We want to make it right. We want to get out there and replace the devices. Can you tell us how many and where they're located? Well, in the past, we really struggled to answer that question. And so now I could very quickly use that right-hand column, filter down by manufacturer and model, and have immediately the number of devices, the device name, all that information right here on the screen, and share that with the manufacturer to say, here are the devices that would need to be repaired. Again, just another look here. This is our corrective work order analysis. So this is showing from January 1st, essentially the start of this contract, through the beginning of September. So you can see that we've had about 2,800 corrective work orders in that time period, which that's a pretty good number of work orders that we've been dealing with. And you can see here at the top we've got some null and undetermined. This system is still in stand-up, so if you see something that looks maybe like it's not quite right. We are still working out the kinks of this program. So if you kind of ignore those and jump down, it looks like our highest failure cause is communications. So if I wanted to drill down into that and understand a little more, I could filter down by communication and then take a look at what's left here. So we can see, okay, that's 266 work orders over, these past few months. Maybe that's not too bad. But if we wanted to filter by a date range, for example, maybe we had a hurricane come through recently and we want to see if devices have recovered after that hurricane, we could look at that time period. We can also use this to identify maybe there's areas where we have bad communication and we need to look at using different communication methods for that area. It just helps us to identify issues with the system and really drill down and better target those issues and try to correct them and improve on it moving forward. So to real quickly go through some pros and cons of this contract, obviously you can tell improved system reliability is the number one thing. We went from, like I said, 50% roughly of our devices working to consistently having over 99% of the devices operational. And that's something that it's taken us a long time to get here, and we're pretty proud of it. Another great pro of this contract is the ability to identify device non-performance. So I also happen to manage GDOT's qualified product list for traffic signals and ITS. And in that, like I mentioned before, we relied a lot in the past on anecdotal data. We'd have one of our signal engineers say, this one device type never works for me. And we would try to, get as much information from them as possible, but ultimately it was tough to say, well, how often, how many devices, how old are the devices? We didn't have much of that data to back it up when it came to what devices we kept or removed from our QPL. So now we've got that data. We've got the mean time between failures. The other pro here I want to point out is just the reduction in repair time. Coming from, even from the 45 days down to 14, it's incredible the difference we see in our system and just how quickly we're able to keep things moving and keep devices operational. And the cons, I'm sure this is not hard to figure out. There's a pretty penny that comes with keeping your devices 99% operational. But we're very lucky in that Georgia has repeatedly said that it's a price worth paying. So we know that it's an expensive contract, but we're now on our third iteration, and our management has continued to support this contract as being worth every bit. I think it's easy to tell from those first few slides, it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of oversight required. So kind of my last two cons here, it is complicated to make sure that you're paying out everything correctly and monitoring those devices correctly. And with that, by default, comes just incredible project oversight. If you're not watching this contract very closely, things could get out of hand. The payment could be off. There's just a lot of things that could go wrong if you're not giving it the oversight it requires. So we're lucky that we've been able to dedicate resources to making sure this contract continues to be successful. And with that, I think we're going to turn it over to Rod for questions.
Okay. Yeah, hi. Thanks very much, Emily, and everybody in their presentations and so forth. So now I think, yeah, we'll go to the questions period here. And then if there's any specific questions, if we can get, each of the presenters to answer, we'll do that. So I guess we'll start at the top. Charles Capp wanted to know if we can see the document links, and so John provided that link to everybody. Are we still having concerns, or is everybody able to access that link? I believe that was handled. Correct, John?
Yes.
Okay. And then we have another question here from Janet Frankel. Is the Nevada DOT asset management documents available to be shared as well? So yes, we will have those available, and I believe, Kevin and everything, this is going to be provided after the webinar, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So that'd be the same thing as GDOT's presentation. I know that even members from our staff would really like to see, some of that information so that we can kind of help ourselves as well. So thank you very much. let's see, we'll go down here. The next question is from Sarah Lesnikowski. And that was just kind of going through and then showing that the period was not there, so yes, that has been handled. And then another question here from Rebecca Gibson Schott, and that's how we did it. Very good. Thank you very much for that. And then this here is just to get into the full screen. Kevin provided, hopefully everybody was able to do that to be able to see the presentations a little bit better. And then Sarah has another question at the publication of the MUTCD regarding the colors and symbols and graphics. And then Mr. Obenberger did provide that link as well. Another question here from Mr. Charles Tapp, and it is, should the ramp metering show green for the fewer devices in operation and red for more as an indicator of the network congestion? So I think, Jim, if you wouldn't mind providing a little bit more background regarding that. And, you know, I know you kind of mentioned it earlier in the presentation, what operational really is. So, Jim, if you wouldn't mind elaborating a little bit more on that.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to first state that I'm not a traffic engineer, so I come from the IT background, so I'm figuring a lot of this out as I go along, working with engineers and that. So this was just a color I just picked out, decided on a few years ago, and no one has made any comments on as far as whether it should be green or red, and that. But like I said, as this gets seen by more and more folks at NDOT, and you know, I'm quite sure that there are gonna be many requests on how they want the data to be presented. So we're ready to change that around as far as if the engineers want to see it with green or with red. So
yeah, and I think what his question is really more geared toward the network congestion, Jim, not so much, you know, the congestion of the roadways. So I think like what we're saying is once we get a little further along, the operational definition and how we want the data visualization is going to kind of come, you know, more to fruition once we get more eyes and everybody looking at it.
Right, and that's one of the things that, as just me from looking at it, I can see where I need to put a little bit more definition on what that number means as far as operational. So for everyone to understand what that percentage is.
Correct. Okay, so we have another question here from Sarah Lesnikowski. The question is regarding the overhead signs and roadside signs, as well as pavement delineation, traffic stripes that are equipped with LED lights and are part of the automated warning ITS devices and control systems that are a part of the TMS systems. Are these traffic elements part of the asset management system, since autonomous vehicles rely on the connected LED lights and the retroreflectivity of the signs, stripes, and materials used? Mr. Obenberger, would you like to maybe provide a response to that?
Right now I will try, Rod. Right now there is no requirements for asset management for ITS devices. So it's all voluntary by a state by choice, and the categorization and what an agency chooses to inventory, maintain an inventory, assess and report on the conditions of ITS assets is up to the discretion of the agency. But I think what we've seen today is there's a lot of value based on the work in Nevada and the Georgia DOT from pursuing an asset management activity for your traffic management system, of how you can use that information to improve how you manage, operate, maintain, and even use that information for future planning decisions related to allocation of resources for your traffic management system. So I don't have a specific answer other than it's up to each agency and how they want to pursue their asset management planning and activities. Hopefully that helps.
And maybe just a little bit from Nevada's perspective, what we're doing too is a strategic data business plan that takes into account anything to do with the CAV and the infrastructure associated with that. So, you know, I believe with our TSMO program plan and the strategic data business plan, which includes our smart mobility, is, you know, we'll be taking a look at what would be required as part of our asset management, anything associated with the autonomous vehicles. So, and I agree. I think it would be more based on the agency and some of the direction that they're going to be using. And then let's see, we'll continue on with that question. Let's see, the same thing for the sign stripes determination state previously under what performance measures and which federal for asset management category these two elements will be covered and considered. Mr. Oppenberger, can you maybe elaborate, or do you have any insight to that question as well?
You know, Rod, I really don't. Again, it goes back to, you know, what each agency decides to do for categorizing and capturing assets for particular types of elements of their roadway system, or for what they may choose to pursue for ITS or traffic management systems.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Okay, and so Sarah's just providing a little bit more where she's working from within the project development and traffic design. And we have another question here from, excuse my interpretation of the language here, but on the naming here, Sachin Basapa is question to Emily. What application was used to develop the dashboards? Are they live in web or only for internal team?
That's a great question. So the main portion of the ITS asset management system that we're using is through Calum, but then the dashboards are actually created through Tableau. So the data feeds through Calum and using Tableau really for visualization, excuse me. And they are internal for right now. So there's a lot of data in there on pricing and different, you know, contract information that we wouldn't necessarily want to just share openly to the world. So for now, that is all user login based.
All right, thank you very much. And it looks like Sarah has a little bit more elaboration. She's wanting to know, in regards to the retroreflectivity of the striping, could it be categorized within the pavement side of, I'm assuming, your transportation asset management plan? I think, again, that probably is like what you're saying, John, earlier, is really on the agent's preference and how you want to categorize some of that stuff. And I think with the way the CAV is, it may change how that goes, where that lies too.
Exactly.
Yeah. And same thing, so she's also wondering, it's not real clear as far as your overhead sign structures. You know, and maybe I'll just talk a little bit about with our department. So what we're doing as part of our enterprise asset, we are including all of our sign structures, and that's an internal thing that we're doing. It's not so much recognized within the transportation asset management plan, but we are recognizing almost all of our asset inventory, including our overhead sign structures. So we have one more question maybe coming in.
Yes, Rod, I would have a question for Emily from the Georgia DOT or for either of you three, the Nevada DOT. How do you view different business processes changing within your agency now that you've got asset information available? Are you making different type of decisions with your TSMO plan, with your annual budget, planning for allocation of resources for replacement of technology that you may not have been doing previously? What sort of changes do you see occurring? Thank you.
Sure. Sure. Emily, do you want to take that on first, or do you want me to go forward?
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely seen that, the 3 iterations of this contract that I mentioned, that it's impacted the way we budget. We've certainly had to up what we're asking for each year because as we set stricter requirements for what we wanted our system to do as far as availability, operating percentage, all of that, there's a dollar amount associated with that every time. And so that's where we would have to go to our management and say, hey, we want to do this. We anticipate it will cost this much. And we've been really lucky in that they've been on board with that each time. And, another element of the contract I didn't mention, but each time we kick this off, we do what we call an initial replacements phase. So it allows the contractor coming in to get on board and say, okay, we have determined, GDOT, that these are some of our older assets that maybe need to be replaced that would inhibit the contractor from keeping the system operating as well as we would like. So we're currently in the process of doing that, where we're replacing, I think it's 33 miles of fiber and the associated devices along that length. So we really had to make sure that we had the funding, and we kind of know that each time this contract ends and we rebid it and another one comes in, that there's going to be some upfront costs. So we try to plan for that accordingly and make sure we're requesting those funds.
Thank you, Emily. And for Nevada, we are too moving towards a performance-based with targeted investments. So we're currently doing that. And as we rolled out our TSMO program plan this past June, we're starting to develop a lot of these strategic deployments and stuff like that are associated, not just for, deployments of ITS devices, but also looking at performance-based maintenance contracts and how that affects our budgets. So that is coming forward. We've been working on some of those. We've had several versions of different performance-based methodologies for, the budgeting. The department has not yet landed on the exact platform that we're going to use. We're piloting a couple of different ones, but we're hoping as we move forward with this that it'll show, the transparency and everything associated and how we can get, the maintenance costs better tracked, especially with the life cycle costing and everything too. So most all of our contracts right now, we're doing them on a performance base, and we're trying to establish those metrics like we're talking about those with the service level agreements and everything too. So we're getting there, and it will change, the way we do business. So let's see, I'm seeing Sarah's got quite a few more questions in here. Let's see. Let's see. So I think she further went, are the future overhead sign structures, will they be modified into dynamic message signs with the overhead structures in the future? Let's see, where did that go? Again, I think that rolled back into the agencies. You're talking about, if you're trying to mix and match color, with your DMS signs, guide signs and so forth, if you're going to be using that functionality, incorporating those. John, do you have any more that you want to add to that?
No, it'll all go back to what's the framework boundaries of what you're going to compile for ITS and traffic management systems for your asset management. And then, in coordination with the asset management efforts of your agency overall. Anything for bridge, pavements, other elements within the public right-of-way where you're managing other physical assets. Is there any overlap, such as pavement marking or road signs or traffic control devices? That's more of a state and local agency issue of how they're being addressed.
Mm-hmm. And then she also adds a little bit more, same as the dynamic traffic control devices such as your CMSs, your portables and stuff like that. I think GDOT, maybe Emily, you can talk a little bit more about that, because I think you mentioned that you guys are tracking a lot of your portables.
As far as portable DMS?
Changeable message signs, are you guys tracking any of those?
We are tracking our dynamic message signs, but not the portable ones. I think I heard you say that.
Correct.
So
okay.
All of our permanent ones are tracked through the contract and have those established baselines for operation. But the portable, we don't really have anything established currently. It's probably something that we'll move to in the future. And, we're currently trying to revise some of our specs, for example, for portables, because it's been, I think, an often overlooked component of our field devices.
Yeah. Now, and for the Nevada Department of Transportation, we do have several portable ITS trailers and portable, devices like changeable message signs. So we do keep the inventory and those within the department's purview. But as far as the contracts go, no. And maybe something in the future, we would take a look at that as well. And Sarah's got another question. Any study or report on the future dynamic digital overhead sign structures? Again, I think this just goes back to, the same, agencies, preference and so forth as you start doing that, with your asset management plan. So, and then Mr. Obenberger, you provided a link for the FHWA's asset management program and information as to be how it's been captured. Okay, let's see, Sarah, Scott, another question. I'm talking about permanent changeable message signs and permanent overhead sign structures. Again, I think this all goes back to, the agency and your preference. I'm not too sure if that's, changing anything, and hopefully we're answering your question, so it's going to be, what the agency's preference is regarding those types of devices. And Jeff Engel has a question here. Were benefit cost calcs performed to help support securing greater funding for the GDOT maintenance contract? For instance, a cost benefit to be able to clear incidents quicker with quicker information, et cetera. Emily, please.
Yeah, so I know that there were some overall incident management BC calculations done in the past. I'm sorry to say that I think they were done quite a few years back, so I'm probably not well versed on them myself. But the great thing with the ITS contract that I've been mentioning is we almost don't have to do the direct benefit cost ratio because our management all can see it themselves. They see it when they drive by devices that are working. And so it's not something that we've been asked, and this is also the third iteration, so I think it's kind of more of a proven concept now. Certainly at the beginning, I think there were questions like that that had to be answered. But now that we're in it, they see the benefit, and so I think there's just kind of an acceptance. Now, if I came back and said I need 5 times my budget from last year, they'd certainly want to see why. But, we show kind of our calculations, rough calculations, back of napkin kind of stuff, when we think that we'll need an increase or, what the new iteration of this contract could be higher, with an explanation of, well, we're upping the expectations, we're shortening the repair times, all these things that have been requested, through GDOT by management and different folks. We're putting all these new expectations in, and with that, that's where this increase is coming from.
Okay, good. And then maybe, just back to some of the part of the study and everything that we were doing too, and in specific for Nevada, when we recognized our TAMP with the ITS assets, we're looking to incorporate the life cycle costing, not so much a benefit cost, but we want to make sure that we track that and not just, look at the manufacturer's recommendation, but, track that and then look at it, based on, the targets that you're going to set so you can get out there and start doing, better investments, for those assets. And it looks like I don't think we have any more questions coming forward. So, John, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'll turn this back over to you.
Yeah, thank you much. I will put my email address in the question and discussion area if anybody belongs to an agency that is not currently a member of the Traffic Management Center Pool Fund Study. We'd encourage you to join. It's open to toll authorities, toll operators, local agencies, regional authorities, state DOTs, anybody that's managing and operating a part of the surface transportation system. The money that's collected each year from the states goes 100% into the development of products similar to what we've seen today. Federal Highways provides the staff to manage the effort and hire a consultant to help with the logistics, administration, and oversight of helping to move all the different projects forward each year. I'd encourage you to go to, and we've got the link, there'll be a specific web page where all the presentations will be able to be downloaded from the NOCO website. So we want to thank the hardworking staff and for NOCO for all their work, willingness to support this webinar, putting everything on a page for everybody to download individual presentations, or if you missed somebody in your office or your organization missed a presentation, they can listen to the video afterwards. We're going through the publication review and approval process internally within Federal Highways. As you can appreciate, the use of the word shall, should, may, must, do not, those have connotations in written reports. So people on this call are familiar with the METCD and terminology. So it takes us a while to get a lot of reports published, but we're in that process, and we're hoping by the end of September we'll have this document available for people to download on the TMC Pool Fund Study website, and you can see the address here on this webpage for that. So I appreciate all the speakers for preparing their presentation, especially Dan Lukasik for all of his hard work in pulling the presentation together and preparing the report. Job well done. Also appreciate the primary contractor that Dan worked with on this project as well, and Leidos, they did a fantastic job with this effort as well. So job well done on the contract side. Appreciate all the hard work and willingness to volunteer for the presentations, and all the participants on today's webinar for your interaction and questions and consideration of this. We appreciate you going to the NOCO website looking for other websites or other webinars that will come available the remainder of September, October, November into December. So we look forward to seeing you again on future webinars. Thank you all. And Kevin, any last words on your end before we sign off?
No, thank you, John. Thanks to all the presenters, John, Jim, Emily, Dan, LaShawn, Rod. I'll put up the intro page again so that everyone has a chance to download the slides from here if you don't want to go to the NOCO website later. Thank you all, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.